I will now warmly welcome, a new friend of FAN, Loyola Academy faculty member Colleen Whalen. She teaches English. I love every English teacher I've ever had except for Mrs. Porrick. She says, "You need to stop talking to the boys." Colleen will offer introductions of both Anne and Heidi. So let's welcome Colleen.
Thanks, Lonnie. On behalf of Loyola Academy, I'd like to thank the good folks at the Family Action Network for somehow gathering us all here for this grace-filled event. Somehow, we are all in this beautiful space with joyful intentions and anticipation, and somehow, we have two amazing women here with us to share conversation about these thoughts on love. After writing for the Chicago Tribune for 23 years, and Heidi, you must have started in high school, Heidi continues to write a nationally syndicated column each week, while also serving as the Director of External Affairs for the University of Chicago's TMW Center for Early Learning. Anne Lamott honors us here tonight with her new book, Somehow, Thoughts on Love, along with bestsellers, novels, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. She offers us insight that goes beyond honesty and authenticity with lines like, "God can only love. Grace bats last. Sometimes it all just sucks. Miracles are rarely lovely." And one of my favorites, that holy reminder that we all are, indeed, human, flawed, and gorgeous. Somehow I know grace surrounds us here tonight as we listen to these women. Join me in welcoming Anne Lamott and Heidi Stevens.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I had lost my phone temporarily, and many people are looking for it, but then you found it in my purse.
Yeah.
So. But I've been on the road for 12 cities in a row, and that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm fine. I'm really happy to be here. My best friend is here, Doug Foster, and and a really old friend, Debbie Hepburn, and Lois. Oh my God. So and we just completely bonded in the car. So I don't have any interesting problems at this moment.
Perfect. I know there's lots of spiritual leaders in the house if we have any interesting problems that we need solving, or ethical dilemmas, or any of that. So we have backup if problems come up.
My what?
We have backup if problems come up. There's
Okay.
lots of spiritual leaders in the house, right?
Okay,
Raise your
good.
hand.
Yeah.
I can't see you anyway, so I'll just pretend you're raising your hands. It's very bright.
All right.
Okay, why did we need a book about love in this moment? A book from you about love in this moment?
Me about love? Well, because I think obviously not love is killing us. It's killing democracy. It's killing so many of the people I've known, and it's killing whole nations. And I actually started out wanting to write a book for my son and grandson for when I'm gone, that was sort of an operating instructions of everything I know that has ever worked before, and that will almost certainly work no matter what their future holds, and their future is going to be rough. You know, about 5 years ago, the UN climate papers came out that said we had 12 years to turn things around with radical, ferocious changes, and of course, none of them were made. So I just know that in my life, I've had some, like everybody here has had some really incredibly tough, horrible, personal times and entire administrations. I won't name names, but, and certain things worked. Community works, activism works, art works. And so I started writing these books. I was going to call it P.S., because it was going to be all these stories I hadn't told yet that I thought might be interesting. And then I wrote 3 of them and they had to do with love. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to write a love book because the New York literati will hate it, you know, because it's not snarky and ironic. And, but there I was. I mean, it was even too California for me. And I have never, I was 70 last week, and I've never left California. So I just trembled at the thought of it. But then I thought, if everything I know that works and endures and ever has gotten us out of deep holes, it's some realm of love or another. And that's how I ended up writing it. It was an accident.
Okay, I love that. Did you resist at any point in your life love the way you resisted
Did I
maybe
resist
writing
love?
a book about love?
No, of course.
No.
I mean, of course, love is scary, and everybody here, probably the worst pain you've ever experienced in your life came from love, and from the loss of love, and from the unsurvivable losses of love, and I've always resisted it. You know, my friend Duncan Trussell, who's the comedian who did Midnight Gospel, he said, when you first meet me, you're meeting my bodyguard. And I really love that line. It's really me. And that I was raised this way, and the culture and my parents celebrated the bodyguard my brothers and I came up with that was so confident and so acclaimed, and, you know, the best in the class, and this and that. And I got sober when I was 32, and that was when I was told that I wasn't going to be able to stay sober unless I got real. And, you know, the ancient Greeks called God the really real. And I learned that I was going to have to, you know, tell my secrets and do the deep dive into who I actually was instead of who I'd always pretended to be, because I did so well being that person that my family and the culture loved. And so, yeah, I mean, I've resisted it every step of the way. But it's like anything. It's like playing tennis or pickleball or writing. You know, you practice doing it. You practice being vulnerable with somebody, or you practice accepting love, which the whole last chapter is about the great line of the mystical poet William Blake's great poem that says, "We are here to learn to endure the beams of love." And it doesn't come easy, but every time you let it in a little bit and surprise yourself because you're having affection for somebody that you just wanted to run screaming for your cute little life from, it's like Nautilus,
Yeah.
and you get some muscles. And I've always heard in recovery that the willingness comes from the pain. And I think as you get older and you start to notice how much time you've squandered and how much you fixated on this stupid shit that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, like what your butt looks like, or you know, or your rankings in the world, and your status and all that. You know, I spend a lot of time with people that are dying, and they're not thinking about their promotions, and they're not thinking about their titles, and they're thinking about the miracle that they were loved, that they love a few people who have clustered around them, who are there for them no matter what, and through it all till they pass over to whatever awaits us. And that's all they talk about is memories, and all the memories have to do with love.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That was my favorite part of the book, the coda, glimmers, where you used that quote. And I wondered what does that mean, to endure the beams of love?
Well, there's a whole chapter on it. But in a nutshell, it means that for girls and women, and especially maybe those of us that were raised in the 50s and early 60s, our sense of value before the women's movement, which burst forth when I'm 16, where I find salvation in many, many bowls of lentils. Before that,
Why lentils?
What?
Why lentils?
Oh, because at all women's movements, meetings you went to in the 60s, they would say truth that you'd never heard before, that you could be angry, that you could love who you loved, that you could cry, that you could feel extremely confused and shamed by who you thought women were supposed to be. And they told you their truth, and they told you their stories, and they said, yeah, we're mad. But I would say, and you can correct me, but I would say at 80% of these meetings of the women's movement, when we were born again, lentils were involved. But like really good lentils. Like lentils with lots of onions, and then there'd be really good crusty bread, because we were women. I was a girl. So, but anyway, that was when I first began to understand that there was somebody inside of me who the world and my family couldn't destroy, but it was buried pretty deep, because all I knew to do was to keep impressing people and to keep doing better and better, and to keep having more and more impressive people be impressed by me. That's really what I was taught to do. And it was like the forward thrust, that you just keep doing better and reaching higher goals. If you did something great, you better do it again. And you might not be able to. It might have been something that was going to be a fabulous thing that had happened, but was a one-off. But that wasn't the system. The system was strive and hustle and, dance as fast as you can, so that you can get higher and higher in the eyes of the world. Well, it didn't get me anywhere, and I had a lot of books out when I was a young woman. Yeah. And, and I had these holes like Swiss cheese inside of me from having had such a crazy expressions of love in my family, because my parents didn't get along at all. Or they got along, but in a Pinter play, Right. There were these very crisp conversations, but they never fought. But it was all negotiated. And I thought love was a deal, that if you did this, if you helped me in this way, if you agreed to do that, you did this, I did that. It was like a business, and that's what I knew of love.
Yeah.
And so to learn to endure the beams of love meant that no matter whether I was shining or not, or failing, or flopping around, or just lost, that I was loved. Like my best girlfriends loved me. My best girlfriends loved me. My dad loved me. My younger brother especially. They just loved me no matter what. And when I could practice believing that, because you think that if people know you too well, they're going to recoil. And one of the stories in the book is about somebody who I was very, very close to, and am again, but who felt he knew me too well, and said it was over, and he didn't want to turn out like me.
Yeah.
Well, how do you find your way out of the hole when somebody you have loved for 20 years and trust thinks they know you so well, they're seeing your inside self, and they're finding it just, everything they don't want to be.
Right.
It's scary and it's shocking. And I think that's a very common fear beginning in childhood, that if you know us too well, you're not going to be able to love us.
You'll recoil.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that about best girlfriends, because you tweeted a couple days or weeks ago, maybe, I think it was your 5-year anniversary to Neil, and you said that your advice was, I think it was twofold, never give up, because you met Neil at what, 63?
62,
62.
Yeah.
Never give up, and then also, regardless of gender, marry someone who would be your very best girlfriend.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'd always had men that were impressive or well-known or cool in some way, or, fun. But I always secretly knew that if they were a woman, they wouldn't be my best girlfriend. And so I was hanging out. Now, my best girlfriend is here. He's a man named Doug. But I always knew with my romantic partners that if they were women, they would not be my best girlfriend, because we didn't grok each other. We didn't have that safe intimacy
Yeah.
that you have with your best girlfriends. And then I met someone, and I do. So my son has "We Never Give Up" tattooed on his left forearm. And so I always I just never gave up. But I had a terrible year at Match. You can read about it. Just Google Anne Lamott at Match. And I didn't know how to date because I'd always just sort of known who the next hostage was going to be. And they always were just right there. And I did a year of dating because I didn't know how to set the boundary of, no, I don't want to have a second date because you're like icky. But, and I mean, there was one that had this horrible Beavis and Butthead laugh, but he was very sweet. I had 3 men bring me manuscripts. And I had one man, between our second and what would have been our third date, ask if it was too early to give me a plot treatment, right? And so, but I learned to say no. Mm-hmm. I learned to say, I really appreciate you meeting me for coffee. I don't think it's really a second date. But I learned to do that. And then I learned, there's a piece in the book about this, that because I was a woman raised in the 50s and 60s, I just was like a flight attendant to the world, and to my son and my grandchild and my brothers and the world. I just gave everything I had, and then I took the leftovers because that's what my mom taught me. She was from England, which is its own story, but there's 12-step groups for the children of the English, but because they're so crazy. But my mother was unhappily married for 27 years, and my dad made us breakfast every single morning, and my mother never let anyone else eat the broken egg yolk. My mother always took the broken egg yolk, and I had always done that too. And one day, I just lost it. It's hard to say why I didn't the day before or a month before.
Right.
But I lost it, and I went to my older brother who was staying with me. He's a fundamentalist Christian, and I adore him, but I think, got issues. And I just said, I'm so isolated. I just feel like I'm giving everything away. And he just didn't know how to respond, and it was like some Christian bumper sticker, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I got in the car, and I was sobbing and furious, and I was hitting the steering wheel, and I was saying, I hate you, Mom, and I hate you, Dad. I don't care if it was the best you could do. It was awful, and I've never been able to, and Sam, I'm so fucking sick of you and your needs, and I mean, I turned on my grandchild, right? And and I cried, and it was a 40-minute cry and I finally pulled over, and I called my mentor of 35 years, whose name is Horrible Bonnie, and I called her, and I said, I'm so empty and angry and furious, and there was this silence, and she said, Annie, this is what we paid for. She said, you're nobody's priority because you're not your own priority, and she said, I was there. And what I had to do and what my mentor made me do was to be my own priority for 3 months, like romantically. And it will begin with going by the health food store and getting those overpriced handmade tamales and flowers. And she said, we're going to do this every day. And I did it, and I became my own priority. And then Neil appeared. It's actually in another story. So you don't even really have to buy the book. Okay, no, seriously, you don't have to buy the book. And Neil's
buy the book.
No. Yeah. Neil's thing, like almost 8 years ago when we met, he had a couple things. One was that he said, I don't know is a portal. And I was raised by atheists and intellectuals, and it was not something you did, which was to say you didn't know. You either knew or you found out or you pretended you knew. You just made something up, And for Neil to say, I don't know, is a portal. To what? Well, to yourself, to a more spacious or expansive life. I don't know. How could I know? If it's someone else's problem, I probably don't have the solution. But I didn't know that I didn't have to try to come up with one and give more of my life force to somebody who had tools, to do the work. But the other thing he taught me was something he's written a book about called Better Days, which was the inner critic. On our third date, we did this work he does with clients on the inner critic. And it was about, he'd said, have you ever had a voice, have you noticed a voice, probably since early childhood, that always kept you small and afraid? And always said, like, don't write a book on love, or don't let anyone in too deeply, don't let the bodyguard get very far. And I said, yeah, I mean, since I'm 4. You know, I had migraines by 5. And he said, well, that's the inner critic. And that served a very important purpose, which was to keep you from running out into the street when you're 4 and 5 and 6. And it kept you from swimming out, you know, past the breakers. But I think you're very good with traffic safety now, you know, and he taught me to identify it, and this voice, like as I like on book tour, I mean that everything can just go south on you in a moment, in a blink of an eye. Everything that was going really beautifully, it's over, and you're a completely doomed and humiliated individual. But what happens if you start to do this work? Or you can do it just now. You don't have to buy the book. You can get an excerpt at what's it called, like Apple Books or iBooks, whatever they're called. It's called Better Days. But the work is to notice it, and to say, oh, it's you. Right. It's not truth. It's not my intuition. It's not my reality. But it's something that wants to keep me small and afraid and in control. And so that was, as much as anything, how I started to learn to endure the beams of love, because I had believed that voice for 62 or 63 years, that made me cringe about myself. Yeah. And I broke through that. And it still comes up. I mean, it came up this week. And I go, oh, it's you. It's just you. Yeah. Why don't you go to the library and read, and I'm going to try to get this morning's work done. Right. And it does. It will.
Just something to break the spell, right?
It breaks the trance, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I think about when you're talking about Neil and the best girlfriend's approach to love is that, like, I think so much of the way love is modeled to us has this kind of like correcting or punishing element to it, right? Like parental love, certainly God's love, at least in a lot of mainstream religions, there's this like catching the person being bad and sort of correcting them putting them on a different path, disciplining them. And we don't do that with our best girlfriends, right? So like imagining a partnership where there's none of that feels like, man, that would be really healthy and pretty fun.
And radical.
Right? Yeah. So is that how it is with Neil?
So what?
Is that how it is with Neil? I mean, are you letting go of some of that?
It's real life, you know, and life can get very lifey. In relationships, whether it's with your children, your parents, or a partner, or, you know, relatives. And so things come up, and it's just really painful. And in the book, again, see how much money I'm saving you tonight. In the very beginning, well, maybe I'm going to read it. It's sort of funny, if that's okay.
Read it,
if I can find it. It's about what happens with when things go south on us. Not positive I can find it, but maybe I can paraphrase it. What happens is that Neil says something that makes me really sad, or gets under my skin, or hurts my feelings, and then
you freeze him out.
What?
And then you freeze him out.
Then I get very, very quiet in a way that is like terrifying. It's like Stephen King, and I won't be able to find it. Wait, I saw his name. And then I get really quiet. But I remain on the couch with the dogs and Neil. But it's clear that I'm bitter. And then he gets up. He's a very large man. He's 6'3", and he has these huge, like, feet like Sasquatch, and they're loud. And we have wooden floors. And he stomps around with these old tired briefs that he's fished out of his battered old briefcase that he's going to present again as reasons that he's right. And so I get up, and I go to our room, and I close the door, and I get the cat out, who is my main home health care provider, and I start to cry, but then I stop, and then he comes in, and I've weaponized my silence by then, and he knows that it's like a big thing, but he stomps around some more, and then he leaves, because he has to go collect himself, and then I sit there and I think, men are pigs. And then I start to think about divorce and how much I hate him. And then he has a moment of clarity in the living room, which is that he's so completely doomed without me. Really, I mean, I just mean this objectively. Seriously, he's a doomed human. And so then he comes back and then he's crying. And so then we both cry. And then I talk like this. First I sit there and I'm the little match girl. And then we start talking. I'm like, oh, it just really hurt. And then we come back together. It's an hour to 90 minutes. And it's about every 3 months. And in between, we can annoy each other. We're human beings. We're annoying. We're both writers. People are annoying. People can be unconscious, you know?
Yeah. Do you think he expected that when he matched with you on that website? This every 3 months?
On our second date, like on the first date, he has this earlier book called Shapes of Truth. And it's this trippy work he does. It's like too California for me. It's way out there. And in fact, if you go to his website, it's shapesoftruth.com. And the reason I mention this is because there are 37 stunning writing tips there. And he's written them all out, and it's free. And it's great for writers, called Shapes of Truth. But on our first date, he did that work with me because I was really upset about. So I'd showed up, and I'd had to let somebody go who was helping me with my grandchild in the mornings, getting him ready for school and stuff. And I just was like, oh, I was just mad at myself, mad at her. And we did that. On the second date, we were just saying, God, it was so fun yesterday. We haven't actually been apart since that night, 2016. Unless one of us has been out of town on business. But he said, I love talking to you. He said, I'm a little worried that you're so childlike that it will remind me of my mother, who was, you're going to love this, mentally ill. Right? So this was our second date. So
I'm weak in the knees.
I started crying. I start crying on our second date. And I said, well, like when I was a child, I was super sensitive, and I still am. And no one said, oh, it's a wonderful way to be sensitive and to have a big heart for the world and whatnot. No one mentioned that. They said, you need to get tougher skin. And the battle cry was, oh, for Christ's sake, Annie, now what? Right? And what that meant was, if you can be a completely different girl, then this family will be a lot more functional and we'll all be a lot more comfortable. There was a book that the parents passed around called The Overly Sensitive Child, right? If you were saddled with a monster like me, who I would cry because I saw the National Geographic and it was about Africa. It was about children in Africa or India. It was about babies with flies on their eyes, so I would cry and they went, oh, Annie, and so when Neil said that, I thought, God, that's like saying I should be a completely different person so you'll be more comfortable and I won't make you think of your schizoaffective batshit mother. I mean that nicely, really, I do. And then he just teared up when I teared up, and then I knew like we had something that was gonna possibly work itself out.
And it did. I remember reading in the New York Times vows column, because they covered your wedding, as they should have. One of your friends said, the kindest person I know is marrying the smartest person I know, and I don't always know which is which.
Well, Neil is definitely smarter than I am. I mean, he's overeducated, so for what it's worth. But he has this encyclopedic memory of stuff, and he's a deep, serious reader and movie watcher and TV watcher. And me, left to my own devices, I'm all about Below Deck, you know? And the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I hope you are all watching it. How many people here are watching the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City? Oh, thank God. Thank God. Never anything better on TV. Right, we'll talk, okay?
She'll personalize your book.
Yeah.
That's happening.
I think I'm an intellectual. We're both very, very left-wing and intellectual, but he's really brilliant. He's seriously brilliant. And so, and he thinks I'm like super kind. So I was kind of insulted that he didn't think I was like the kindest and smartest person he knew, but.
Yeah, I think it was an anonymous quote, so.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, let's talk for a minute about attics, which sounds
Okay.
A-T-T-I-C.
Attics.
The attic
Yeah.
that's above you have a whole chapter about your attic, and it becomes sort of a, I don't know, not even a metaphor, like actual literal attics show up in the book. Talk a little bit about what you're feeling about your attic, and then I have a question.
Okay, well, I was a very frightened child because I was trying to save my parents' marriage at like 40 pounds, right? And I was afraid of everything. I'm afraid of a lot of stuff still. And I have a huge faith in God. And, the people like say, well, you can't have faith and fear at the same time. And I think that's just so nice to be so sure of yourself. But I have both. I'm just an afraid person. And I was really afraid of the attics, because first of all, you had to pull down the cord from the ceiling, and then stairs came down, and stairs don't come down from up above you except in Escher, right? And then you go up them and up the stairs, and then there's this horrible frayed string, and it's never quite connected to those, whatever those chains, the chain, always those little beaded balls that fit into the next palm, and then you pull and pull and pull, and finally it clicks on, although it might break off in your hand, and then you're in the dark in the attic, right? And there are all those eyes on you. They're the eyes of the spiders and of the silverfish and of the rats with their scary pointy yellow teeth, and they've all been eating the most precious stuff your family has put away, right? They're all like laughing at you and burping. And they're going, hey, yeah, thanks for the cheese. Yeah, right on. And then, but in those boxes, it's really about what's in the boxes, what you saved, what mattered to your family. So what defines your family, what you couldn't throw away. Your child's first grade report card, your first grade report card. Someone just sent me my first grade class photo. Oh my God, and all the memories, all the birthdays and anniversary parties and all the trips and all the everything, and it's all there, and it's all being consumed by the critters up there, but you can, and then you never sort it out. You move from one place and you put it in the attic, and you never sort it out, but you add to it, because you have to put stuff in the attic, if you've lived anywhere for any length of time, and then when you move, you have to take all the boxes out and move it to the new house, put them in the attic with the new mice and the silverfish and rats and.
Are you familiar with the concept of Swedish death cleaning?
Yes, and I have gone through these boxes. When we moved 5 houses away because I'm a homebody. I don't like to leave my house. I like to be on my couch. I loved my neighborhood, but we needed to move because Neil moved in and my son and grandson lived there with us, and we needed another house, so I moved like 5 houses away. So we took all the boxes that I hadn't unpacked from the last move and moved them with Neil's boxes. But I go through stuff and I throw out hefty bags full of papers, that I've been saving for a long time. Some of them are notes that I just don't get them. They don't sing to me anymore. I don't think I'm going to get to them. And there's still more. It's like this crazy system that there's just, our house is really neat and there's not a ton of stuff in it. And yet there are just these boxes and boxes of our lives. And so That doesn't make it sound like a very interesting chapter. but it's an interesting chapter because what is so touching is what was so precious to us over time. The little ones in our family, whether you had kids or nieces and nephews, what was so precious about certain times with our families that worked, when it worked. And it's kind of a metaphor for all of life. But I don't think I answered the question very well.
You did. You
no,
answered
I'm
it
having
really
terrible
well.
self-esteem now.
No, it was a.
I'm better. I'm back.
Okay, perfect. It was a perfect answer. There was also something so lovely about reading that your mom saved every card that anyone ever
Yeah.
sent her. That was a detail maybe from what else I've read, you write about your mother, I didn't expect, or just was
Well,
sweet.
I've written a lot about the reconciliation with my mother. My mother was a real handful and just had a ton of things she wished were different about me, and this level of achievement that she breathed down our necks, and it really destroyed us. I mean, we all became addicts and alcoholics, and it wasn't because of my mother, but it was this endless feeling from both my dad and mom that we could do better. Could do better if we set our minds to it. And so with my mom, I wrote some of my favorite stuff about the reconciliation with my mom, and I can't remember exactly what it might be some of it might be in Hallelujah anyway, but the Mercy book. But I have an incredible relationship with my mom since she died. But when she died, which was in 2021, she died of Alzheimer's. It was really a mess. When she died, it took me 2 years to scatter her ashes. And my younger brother and I took incredible care of her for the last few years when she had Alzheimer's, and then when she was in memory care. And yet it all came up like a lava lamp that she was ashamed of me when I was young because I looked so different, because I had this frizzy hair, and because I was really, really tiny and skinny. And then later when I was a teenager, I gained a ton of weight, and it was always expressed. Like, I'll tell you one story, it's going to sound self-aggrandizing, but the first book of mine that was ever on the New York Times bestseller list was my 5th book. It was called Operating Instructions. And I got on the list, and it was a miracle, because it was just a journal, being a single mother. And my dad was a writer, and we'd always hoped he'd get on the list. He didn't. I had 4 books out. They hadn't gotten the list. And my mom was so desperate, and I called her. She was just because of my mom, right? That's why it breaks your heart that she could have such feelings about how it pained her to watch me be me, my whole life. And I called her, Mom, I hit the list. And there was a pause, and she said, oh, good, anything else? And that was really typical. Excuse me, I have something in my throat. So, in recovery, they always say if you want to have loving feelings, do loving things. And I did really loving things for my mom forever. And then when she died, it all came up, and I wouldn't scatter her ashes. It was almost 2 years. And I wasn't going to do one more inauthentic thing around my mom. I wasn't going to pretend to be the girl she wished she had. I wasn't going to be what everybody in the community wanted me to be, like, oh, forgiven. It wasn't that I didn't forgive her. It was that I hadn't even processed it. I hadn't had the courage to look at how that had pretzelized me and how much of my soul it had slimed. And then I finally scattered, and it was beautiful. And that was 22 years ago, and I have an incredible relationship with her. I really do. Mm-hmm. I'll hear music. It could be Mozart or Judy Collins or the Weavers, and I'll just listen to it with my mom, because that's what she raised us, my mom and dad raised us on, all those Joan Baez. and I'll listen with her, or I'll put it on Spotify to feel her. And a lot of the time when I start to, you know how you desperately hope to not turn into your mom, and then you start saying the things your mom would have said to your kids that you swore that you would never say, and you say that, and I feel that, oh God, Mom, like, couldn't you get help? Like, I had a lot of OCD stuff. I had to turn light switches on 17 times before I could get in bed, and a lot of stuff. I had migraines, severe migraines, till I coincidentally left home, at 17. Couldn't you get the help this family needed? Did you not notice that you and Dad didn't talk?
Right.
And that my older brother was shooting up, and I was, and I mean, and it all, it'll come up again, and so it's like a lava lamp, and it's very lifey. It's real love and gratitude for her good heart. She became a lawyer when I was like 20. Wow. And she started the first women's law firm in Honolulu. And she went broke because she didn't ever charge people the right amount of money. And she was a fighter. She was a freedom fighter. She was a civil rights activist. So I have all of this stuff. And I wish that life, if I were God's West Coast representative, I would have life sorted like in a silverware drawer. And the stuff that you loved and appreciated would go where the knives go. And the stuff that you saw destroy your brothers and you would go where the big forks go. And then the stuff that was just kind of typical family, fraught, screwed up and touching would go with the salad, but it's not like that. It's like the silverware drawer kind of drops on the floor and you pick up a teaspoon and you go, I remember that. That was actually very sweet. And you pick up something else and you go, what were you thinking? What were you thinking, Mom?
Yeah.
So,
it's so hopeful, though, that you still have a relationship with her that evolves.
Yeah. And I love finding those letters that you were referencing in her box, in my closet, in my attic, because she'd saved every letter that any friend had ever written her. And there were letters that were just saying, Nikki, I'm thinking of you. I love you. I hope you're well. I'm your friend. And they went and they found an envelope and a stamp. And my mom got seen, and she felt that incredible pulse of love in her. And she reread them. And when I found that, it just really changed a lot of things for me, because I thought, wow, she was so loved. But she was also like the queen, and people waited on her, and mostly her kids had waited on her, but some of you have had mothers, and they want you to, and we waited on her, but these friends loved her so much, and that made me really happy. Yeah.
Maybe those letters were like her women's movement and lentils, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You brought up operating instructions. Just today, someone said to me that book gave her the courage to have a second child after such a, she didn't go into this, so I don't want to put words in her mouth, but after not being sure she wanted a second child. Anyone I talk to about you has a story about how you've changed their lives.
Oh, thank you.
I imagine you hear that a lot about operating instructions, but what book do you hear that most about? Like, this book changed me, or this book saved me, this book helped me heal?
Well, operating instructions and Bird by Bird, and then Traveling Mercies, because a lot of people that come to see me or hear me or read my books just ran screaming for their cute little lives from fundamentalist families, and they didn't even ever think they could be in community or on a spiritual path again. And so that was a book that helped people know that you could find your own way. You could find a God of your understanding, or good orderly direction for the Buddhists here, or the great universal spirit, which spells Gus, who that I recommend for the atheists, the sober atheists I try to help. And so I would say those three, yeah.
Yeah. There's a part in the book where you talk about kind of a tumultuous relationship that ends sort of spectacularly badly, but it led to you writing your best book. So what was your best book? What did that?
I think it was Traveling Mercies. I mean, I'm not sure that's my best book, but I really like it. I mean, there are pieces in it I really love. And it was just a completely toxic relationship with a really well-known writer who was just, I hope he's not here tonight, but it was just an awful relationship, and I just stayed with it because I remember Doug saying this is 29 years ago in Sausalito. Some of you know Sausalito, and Sam and I were going back east to spend the summer with him, and Doug was looking at me. He was like, Annie, look at me. You don't have to go. And I didn't have the wherewithal, the courage, or the just emotional fortitude, because I'd said I was coming. And we went, and about 2 months later, it was over. And I was so addicted. It was one of those sex and love addictions that, I went down the rabbit hole. And I was there for quite a while, but out of it, in recovery, the willingness comes from the pain, and I was in so much pain that I finally looked at that addiction, and I wrote some pieces in there that are just so vulnerable. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's really funny in Traveling Mercies, and people hadn't known that you could be a person of faith and find some of it funny, and that you could that it could be funny and you could be silly and mocking, and I said something in that book like that I was feeling so unhappy with myself that I thought Jesus was drinking gin out of the cat dish, And a lot of people who were raised in fundamentalist Christianity hadn't known that you could say something like that and get away with it. Now, my strongest belief is that fundamentalism is what has and is destroying the world of every stripe. It's the fundamentalists who are at the helm of the destruction of so much that is beautiful and innocent, like children, like their children, and like their nations, and like entire political parties. And so I forgot what the question was, but I remember we were talking about Traveling Mercies.
Yeah. So how did you, I don't even really want to put it in the past tense, how did you and do you find the courage to turn that kind of stuff, a terrible relationship, any number of things that we've talked about and haven't talked about tonight, into stories that you share with people? You could keep that to yourself and it wouldn't help anyone, but you could. So
You could, but I always hear that we're as sick as our secrets, and that when I got sober, I really got the message that I couldn't have these awful secrets, and that I need to tell someone. So I was telling some people, and but for me, it's like a bullseye. And in the center of it is just, Gabriel Garcia said there's your private life, your public life, and then there's your secret life. And my secret life was very, very dark and messy and scary because I'm a female alcoholic, and I had tiny boundary issues with men and other, and stuff. But so inside, in my secret life, that's like the center of the bullseye. And there, it's me, and it's God as I understand God, and it's like my little kid. And it's like a glade, where I am just in that most, it's transcendent, but in an interior way. And then on the next ring of the bullseye, I would tell Neil and Sam, Doug, and my best girlfriend who lives nearby, and 2 other people, maybe. And then the next bullseye out, I would tell 10 friends, because I would know that it was universal. That I don't think I could tell you anything I've done or felt that you wouldn't say, I completely get that. I've done something like that. My details are different. Biographically, we're very different. And then about 6 bullseyes out, I've told this story so often to people in my recovery community or my family and my church and my just the world and everybody. It's universal. And so nothing that I've written is, I don't think, specific to me. I think it's like universal stuff. This terrible ping pong game of all writers where out of the left-hand speaker, this on the left-hand side of the court is this grandiosity and ego, and this is going to go big, this is going to be big, these are going to be amazing reviews, this is going to be this. And then out of the right-hand speaker that, the jig is up, and talk about beating a dead horse and what a loser and all that. And so if I say I have that, there's not a writer on earth who would say, oh, that's funny, you've written like 20 books. I'm surprised to hear. They would say, oh, yeah, I was there this morning.
Right.
Any writer worth their salt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last question, and then I know we want to give the audience time to ask their stuff of you. Would you have any advice for anyone in the room tonight who might still be resisting being loved?
Any advice for anyone here tonight? Well, here's the thing. We're all on borrowed time. Not a soul here, not one single person knows how long they're going to live. And that is the existential question, is how do we live in the face of that? How do we not squander? How do we get real about our lives and about what matters and not trying to be more impressive or more highly ranked or whatever? And so my best friend died when we were both 37 and, of 30 years or, 25 years or something. And she said something that changed my life completely. I was going out with this guy, and we were going to a Lucinda Williams concert, and he had made. I basically dress like John Goodman, right? I usually I wear baggy, comfortable clothes with a welcoming waist, so that it won't have an opinion on me. Like the whole world has an opinion on you, and your pants shouldn't, right? And so, but for this one date to go see Lucinda Williams, he really was kind of hinting that it'd be fun to get dressed up, i.e. wear a dress. So I took Pammy to the store with me. It was 6 weeks before she died. She had a little girl, an 18-month-old. She had a wig on, and I whirled her into the store, and I put the dress on, and it was pretty tight for me, and I came out and I said, do you think this makes my hips look big? And she looked at me gently, and she said, Annie, you don't have that kind of time. And it radicalized me. And I'm still really funky around the corners, and it's always going to come up. And I've had the eyes of the culture judging me and looking at me my whole life. But I think that in order to see what it might be like to open yourself up, open up your heart to the common good, to the... when we were growing up, those of us of a certain age, you heard the words the common good all the time, and you never hear it anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the ways that we can open ourselves up to love is through activism for the great good causes. Like most importantly to me, for November, the women's rights and the rights of the poor and the only point Jesus makes repeatedly is take care of the poor. Just if you don't know, take care of the poor. You actually seem a little tense right now. Why don't you go to the beach, have something to eat, try to take care of the poor, share your food, and we'll talk later. Feed the poor. And that's what this election is about. And it's about freedom, and our great friend Molly Ivan said, freedom fighters don't always win, but they're always right. So you can open yourself up to the community of love by plugging in and by doing what you can wherever you can to advance a culture that is more loving, especially to the people who have been made to feel least loved, the poor or the LGBTQ community or refugees, or this is what the election's about. And so there's a whole piece about joining communities, and that's one way to do it. But you don't have that kind of time either. So you practice where you can. Maybe you're sitting next to somebody and you kind of bonded with them, waiting for the evening to start. Maybe you saw somebody and you waved to them and you talked to them later. It's like Mother Teresa, who I loved, hated the Christopher Hitchens attack on her, but she said, no one can do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. So you just set out and you make that your intention, that you do small things every day with great love. You fill a bag and you go to the food pantry. You buy Oreos and throw it in for the kids, and balloons. And you go to the soup kitchen, or you pick up litter in your neighborhood. You look for it. You know, you notice Jesse, who's 93 on our block, walks down the street every single day because somebody steps in to walk with him. Step in to walk with somebody, you know, but you make a commitment to yourself. Small things with great love, and we'll fight the good fight. And I'm going to do the hardest work we do here on earth, which is the self-love and the self-acceptance, as is.